What's up guys, Josh, aka SavageHydraa here, and welcome to episode 9 in our how-to series. Last time we looked at Switch Initiative and the whole idea of phasing and using moves like U-turn and Volt Switch to gain momentum in battle. This week's episode, I've decided we've finally gone through enough of the in-battle mechanics to actually move on to the actual team building process. So this one's probably kind of short and sweet, and then the episodes after this will be more on specific team building strategies and looking at actual building. So they'll move away from this format and into one, like say, team building on Pokemon Showdown or something. But anyway, let's start off. So first up in the team building process is to think about what sort of type of team that you want to build. There are a few different types, and there's plenty of subtypes in between as well. You've got Hyper Offense, you've got Balanced, and you have Stall. Hyper Offense is, as its name suggests, it's very offensive. It's all basically full of all-out attackers and built to just take things out and take things out quickly with a lot of damage. Stall is pretty much the opposite. It's full of walls and toxic and entry hazards and basically just whittling down your opponent bit by bit by bit by bit by bit with a load of recovery mixed in, so that you just out-sustain your opponent and then they just fall as the battle goes on. Stall is probably the least fun to both play and to use and play against. So I'm not going to be going into a full explanation of Stall in one of the later videos because I don't find it fun at all. You can just piece together anything and it's stupid. Like you can just put in Chansey, Toxic, Gliscor, Ferrothorn, and it's obscene and I hate it, so I'm not going to go into it. But Hyper Offense and Balanced I'll both explain. Balanced is a mix between the two, so you have some really strong attackers, maybe a support, some utility, and a couple of walls / a little bit of recovery, like a Wish Pass or something like that. And there's variations in degrees of each. You can have something that's more like a more balanced Hyper Offense with maybe a bit more utility or a support or something in it. You can have less Stall, whereas things you have got like a late game cleanup sweeper, say, in your Stall team, and stuff like that. But it's really just try everything out and see what fits your playstyle, because not everyone's the same. Everyone has different ways of playing the game, and just make sure you're enjoying the way that you're playing. Even though I will never promote Stall to anyone, ever. So the first thing to think of, and your top priority really when you're team building, is to look at type coverage. So it's the most important component in good team building, because if you've got a significant weakness to a specific type, that team's got a massive hole in it that they can just crumble to if you come up against the wrong matchup. This is obviously different if you're, for whatever reason, playing a monotype team. So if you're playing all water, or I mean, this might be slightly different as well. Say if you're running a rain dance team and having a swift swim team, having like Kingdra, Ludicolo, Gorbis, and maybe well, that's a swift swim, Kabutops and stuff like that. Swift Swim with a lot of rain and water can actually do some really good work, even though it's got a lot of common weaknesses. Swift Swim, it's the speed that gives you the advantage there. And the way you really want to work with it is to work with one Pokemon at a time and then cover weaknesses as you go when you're building the team. So you just do the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, up to the 6, and then you've got all your weaknesses covered. Stab. Not only do you have to think about your type coverage in your defense, in your what you're actually using, but you also have to think about the type coverage in your offense as well. And Stab is often a priority for your offensive moves. Stab is same type attack bonus, and basically means that if a Pokemon is using a move of the same type as the Pokemon is, it gets a 50% boost in power. For example, if a Hydreigon is using Dark Pulse or Dragon Pulse, both of those get Stab, so they get to go increasing 50% in power. And then also you can add in coverage moves where appropriate / possible. So for example, you might want to staple an Ice Beam onto a Tentacruel, or you can chuck a fire type move onto something that's not a fire type, just to give you some coverage against steel types and things like maybe Scizor or Fortress. So you can mix and match, and it's all about building a team that covers each other's backs. You want something that has a lot of synergy within itself, and that's kind of the idea you want to approach with team building. There are a few other things to consider. Obviously, typing isn't everything. Entry hazards. Do you want to use entry hazards like Stealth Rock, Sticky Web? Sticky Web will give you speed control. Stealth Rock and Spikes will give you chip damage, and Toxic Spikes will give you the poison effects. Obviously, there's the individual video on that I did before, so there's that to go to for more information on those. Spread offenses as well. You don't want to be, if you've got a team that's entirely special, you don't want to come up against the Blissey, because then the Blissey will wall your special team entirely. So you need to make sure that you've got a spread of your offenses in both physical and special attack. You want to consider a support. You have offensive supports like say phasers and knockoff users. For example, a physically defensive Donphan might be an offensive support for you because it's carrying Stealth Rock, Rapid Spin, and knockoff. Whereas a defensive support might be something like your, say, a Bronzong that's carrying Light Screen and Reflect and stuff like that. So that's more the kind of difference between offensive and defensive supports. Pivots with switch initiatives, so something carrying Baton Pass, U-turn and Volt Switch, something to consider. You can have bulky pivots, you can have fast pivots, everything like that's explained in the last video, in number 8. And then you also want to check your speed stats, because if you've got a lot of slow Pokemon, then you might want to put in a couple of really fast things or a choice scarf somewhere just to give you some speed, because speed can win you a battle in certain situations. If you got a particularly low speed team, it might also be worth considering adding in a Trick Room user, so then you can use your low speeds to your advantage. And then you also just want to do the whole thing about adding in coverage moves. So I'm going to repeat from the last little bit, but again, you want to add in coverage. It's not all about stab. You want to add in some coverage somewhere, because otherwise you're just going to be crushed when something walls your entire team's stab. And the last bit really is going to be kind of how I go about my team building. I'm a fan of balanced. I'm specialised much more in balanced play rather than hyper offense or stall. So the next video will be an actual team building video. So we'll have that to go to. But for now, I'll just briefly go over how I kind of approach the whole thing. I will choose something that I want to use as an offensive win condition. So, for example, let's give the example. I might want to use my a late game cleanup Scarfed Hydreigon as my win condition, and my late game cleanup when everything's kind of whittled down a bit. Other options you can have potentially might be a Darmanitan, or something like a Garchomp, a Scarf Chomp might be another offensive win condition for you. Anything like that can really be a win condition. You don't have to make it an offensive one. That's just how I prefer to go about it. If anything, you can just choose something that you think, I like this Pokemon, I really want to use that, and then build a team around it. It's always good to start with one thing that you want to use. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Then you want to really cover its weaknesses with 2 more Pokemon. So you want to have something which covers the weaknesses of the original Pokemon, and then also that the original Pokemon potentially covers the weaknesses of the other 2 as well. So it's all about building that synergy up. And then you want to add in then 1 more Pokemon to cover the holes and the weaknesses of number 2 and number 3. So you might have a couple of things that have good type coverage and good spread of resistances, but they might have a particular opening, say that they're weak to ground and there's no resistance to ground there. So you could add in a flying type or something with levitate, and then that covers your ground weakness. And then I always look to the last 2 slots to fill in offensive holes, mainly. And this is where you kind of look at adding more special attack, more physical attack, more bulk and something a bit more tanky, or adding in more speed. It's really dependent on what you've already got on your team and what you've already put in to cover the typings. So this is it's really variable, and you can kind of pick and choose what you might want to use and think, oh, I like that, or I used that before and it wasn't so great, so I'm going to try this one out instead. And just spread about what you want to do and play around with it, because team building is all about playing around with it. And again, the best way to try your team out is to playtest it. So if you've got your team on Showdown, go on the ladder, try it out a bit. If you encounter something that gives your team a particular problem, you can then go back and modify it and give it a little do-over with some of the other things, and maybe play around with the movesets and the EV spreads, and then go back into the ladder and try it out again. And when you encounter that thing that screwed you over last time, you can see if it works this time against it. So that's pretty much it for the team building video. Next time we'll be looking much more in depth to a specific team and building a team in the Showdown client. So that will be a nice, interesting experience. I'll be looking at probably a balanced UU team, because UU is my personal tier that I kind of know best, and balanced is the way that I play. And then hopefully the weeks after we might have some guest people on for the series, and maybe look at OU or RU or NU and some hyper offense sort of stuff, and have a look at some specific team building examples. So if you enjoyed this video and found that useful, then do leave a like. If you want to see more, then hit that subscribe button. And then if there's any feedback you want to give, or anything you think that I've missed in this video, or anything to improve in the series in general, do leave comments down below and I'll be sure to chase them up. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.